In this chapter, we're going to talk about Chapter 12, Career Counseling for Individuals with Disabilities. So, career counseling for individuals with disabilities. So, the focus should be on the unique identity of a person rather than on a label. A label begins to imply that every person with that label is alike or similar and separate from that general population. And so, we know that each individual is so unique and has their own, even in the way we speak about individuals with disabilities. So, you're going to hear me use person first language throughout most of this um, presentation, but actually in the disability research, you'll find that there are multiple kind of opinions about this. And so some people, especially within certain cultural groups, have really embraced their definition of the way that they describe themselves, and they want to be called um, a disabled person, or they want to be called like uh, when Asperger's was a disability, was a diagnosis, there were people who like really embraced it and wanted to be called Aspies. And so person first language is supposed to honor the person rather than labeling somebody as the disability. And so there you'll see within the literature, within the community, that folks have differing opinions on this. And so it's really important that we utilize the language that the client identifies as. So you'll hear me occasionally, even in this PowerPoint, sometimes use, maybe depending on somebody's diagnosis. And that's probably because I'm more familiar with maybe a population group that does tend to utilize that. So in the resources, I'll include a TED Talk by Temple Grandin, wonderful autism advocate. So she is a person with autism. And she is a wonderful speaker and really talks about kind of how it takes all kinds of minds to do the different things within our world. And so she has books, movies about her, and I really recommend you looking more into her story. She can be very inspirational, and it's been really cool to watch how she has developed even beyond what she does kind of within her field, and how she's become an advocate outside of her field. So we know that the American with Disabilities Act that occurred back in 1990, and it's really focused on requiring kind of public accommodations and commercial facilities to provide what they should, equal access to folks with disabilities. And so generally, this is defined as someone who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activity or has a record of such impairment. And so, what you'll hear about, especially in the career literature, is that definition of the one or more major life activity. That's where it can get a little bit challenging for some folks to get that disability designation if they are needing that in order to receive accommodations. All right, so some special problems and needs of individuals with disabilities. We know that these needs can be very inclusive and pervasive. So, for some folks, it might be that they are adjusting to physical trauma. It might have been a recent physical trauma, right? Somebody who is in a wheelchair may not have been in a wheelchair, from birth on. And so it might be a new occurrence, right? And so they might still be adjusting to something of that nature. We know with individuals with disabilities, they might have feelings of either inferiority or even negative stereotypes. And so if you think about in schools, the way, folks with exceptional, who are oh, so sorry. Folks who are in exceptional education may have been made fun of, or, things about the type of bus they ride might have been joked about, right? And it enforces these negative stereotypes. It's important that we recognize that some folks are also have what we call an invisible disability. So things like emotional needs. So an anxiety disorder can qualify for a disability. And so these aspects, if it's not something that somebody can visibly see, like a physical trauma, right, then this person may not even be feeling like they are a part of this cultural group, right? But they still might be battling some of those feelings of inferiority based on that. We know that for a lot of folks in this category that they might have experienced challenges in school, and we know that there's increased rates of dropping out of school. So what's our goal as helpers? And then how do we as helpers constantly think about the ways that we're adjusting what we're doing for folks. And so I'll post, we know that there's issues with assessment in this group. So for folks with intellectual disabilities, right, they may not be able to just take the same assessment as everybody else. So when I was in career counseling, we utilize a lot of different interest inventories. So the strong being a common one that's used for folks. And so a strong interest inventory of folks with a person with an intellectual disability wouldn't qualify to be able to take that assessment. So I'll include in the resources, there's actually a website that has taken this assessment and edited it to where it would be appropriate for someone with an intellectual disability. So it utilizes more pictures as opposed to words, and allows the client to say, yes, I would like that. No, I wouldn't like that. So the implications for career counseling. Counselors have to adopt proactive roles. They're going to have to be proactive in this process and ensure that they're knowledgeable about resources within their area. And so they should be supporting education and training programs that foster acceptance in the work world. So there's many like work readiness programs that have begun to pop up in communities. And so we as counselors need to be supporting those, making sure we're knowledgeable about those, helping them with those when we can. And these programs that assist educators, families, and employees in working with individuals with disabilities can be invaluable in reducing those existing physical and psychological barriers. So when I was at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, we had a program. It was a certificate program where folks with intellectual disabilities were able to come to college classes. Essentially, they were auditing these classes, but they were able to also be receiving peer support as well as participating in career counseling to be able to prepare them for the world of work. And so it was an invaluable time where they got to build those experiences, test out some career interests, and actually conduct internships with partners in the community that were willing to do this. And some were gaining invaluable skills. I know one student who was getting her CRN certification, and so she was going to be able to work in, assisted livings and things like that in the future. So we need to work on educating and counseling individuals with disabilities in public schools. So back in the 1800s, those were when first residential schools were created for students with disabilities. And it's important that we realize that education has not always been a part of public school. So that's why we've pushed for kind of inclusion classrooms and things of that nature. Um, and so in 1975, the Education for All Handicapped Children Act was passed by Congress. And these goals are facilitated by individual education plans, so IEPs. So sometimes our role, even if we're working within the community and not within a school system, we might be having to help our clients, help parents understand how to self-advocate, how to advocate for adequate IEPs to be created. And so part of our job might be to help them in advocating in that way for accommodations to be provided and consistently provided in the classroom. Then we know So we have privately supported rehabilitation agencies. So a really popular one here would be Goodwill Industries. So it trains people who have disabilities to work. It provides a wide range of activities, including things from classroom instruction all the way to counseling, placement, therapy, things like that. And so it provides those educational skills training programs. So most age groups can be served by a privately supported nonprofit rehabilitation agency. So it's just being aware and maybe looking into in your kind of community, what kind of rehabilitation agencies do you have? And then state rehabilitation programs. So, the purpose of a state rehabilitation program is to provide counseling and other services to individuals with a disability. And so, the eligibility here is that someone must have these two criteria. They must have a disability that results in a substantial handicap to employment, and then VOC rehab services must be expected to benefit the person relative to employability. And so they have to be able to meet those criteria to be eligible for this program. But once again, being knowledgeable of what career kind of workforce development resources you have in your community, and then how it relates to state funding, state resources, as well as kind of nonprofit resources. Now I want to give you an example of an intervention that you can use with someone. And I say it can be used with someone with a disability, but this is one that could be applied to all populations for sure. So a career collage. What's great about this is long gone are the days of having the stacks of magazines. We can actually do this on a computer. So you can actually use like PowerPoint and Canva or something like that, and create a career collage. So all you would have to do is teach a client how to copy and paste, and they can use Google Images and they can create their own career collage. So you could use a very general prompt of kind of, uh, when you think about your ideal job, your dream job, what would you be doing, right? I want you to find pictures of what that would look like. Or you could do this and, apply it to someone's strengths, their values, their interests. You could do it for all of those, right? Just depends on the prompt that you create. So the slide that's up here, this was a school counselor who created this, right? And thus they have the ASCA model because that's one of their, things that they utilize to help them in their everyday work. They're going to be doing group counseling. They're going to be doing helping folks with their social and emotional development. So they got their emojis and you know, sometimes they're motivating people to finish, right? And so all of this they threw on a screen and this described kind of their interests and why they went into school counseling. Um, so a lot of different prompts, a lot of different ways you can do this, but it allows, once again, pictures to be representing, and so not over relying on words, but then after they've created their slide, you can sit there and say, okay, so tell me about why did you put an ear on here? Why is that important to you? Or tell me about hard work. Or what have you had to, when's a time you had to utilize hard work? In your life, or how will you see that being important in this job, right? So many prompts that you can utilize, and this is just one example of a way you can use a career collage. So jump on the question and answer discussion board if you have any questions.